Today, our group, Sarah Lubin, Vivian Medina, Natalie Ng, Grace Topaz, and Julia Brown, will be presenting about the logistics challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic.
So, we chose this topic because we were all impacted by COVID-19 a few years ago. And some background about this pandemic is that it greatly impacted the entire world and heavily disrupted supply chain processes around the globe. There was a lot of instability in supply and demand at the time, mostly because of labor shortages and either less demand or more of it. For example, the demand for toilet paper shot up and the industry wasn't able to keep up with the demand. And because of mandatory quarantining, major cities and hubs closed down, and this also affected the movement of goods in the supply chain. A problem that we identified, which I spoke a little bit about earlier, was the critical labor shortage. Due to how severe COVID-19 was, the CDC and many federal governments around the world mandated quarantines. This prevented people from going to work and overall left an impact on the inventory of companies. So as you can see in the graph, in 2020, the number of inventory that businesses had to sell dipped because there wasn't enough people to work and produce goods. So, because of labor shortages, there was a negative impact on how many goods could be produced, how quickly they could be made, and the overall quality of the product. This caused problems for managers of supply chains because they had to figure out how to deal with these delays in production, delivery, and they also had to figure out how to fill labor shortages. And this probably came with increased costs. How this problem affects the future is kind of what we're seeing right now because it is a few years after the pandemic. Having people stay at home made many businesses realize that they could still achieve their company goals with having their employees working remotely. So today, some employees are still working from home because the business saves money by not having people going into the office, but they can still be efficient. And some businesses are also turned towards utilizing artificial intelligence and technology instead of being too heavily reliant on human labor.
Why do we care about these critical labor shortages during the pandemic? There are three main reasons. The first is production capacity. With a significant portion of the workforce being unable to work due to illness or quarantine mandates, fewer goods are able to be produced. This impacts the availability of products in the market. Labor shortages will also cause supply chain disruptions. With less people, deliveries will be delayed in various stages of the supply chain, which will incur additional costs, such as hiring temporary workers, paying overtime to current workers, or investing in automation. These costs will cause some decision-making challenges for management. They will have to make rapid and strategic adjustments to cope with the disruptions. The pandemic highlighted the need for supply chain managers to be able to handle developing contingency plans to ensure continuity in operations. Obviously, it's extremely important to discuss labor shortages amidst COVID-19, and there are some potential consequences if it's not addressed. One of these is the prolonged supply chain disruptions it will cause. The delays in production and delivery could be extended long-term, leading to persistent stockouts and affecting consumer satisfaction and business revenue. Something else that will happen are damages to the company financially and damages to their reputation. Continued labor shortages will lead to ongoing increased costs, meaning lower profitability and a suffering brand image. The last potential consequence I want to address are the operational inefficiencies caused. Because of a potentially less skilled workforce, there could be quality issues resulting in increased returns and warranty claims. Ongoing productivity losses will also affect the overall efficiency and effectiveness of supply chain operations.
The COVID-19 pandemic gave us a real-world example of how vulnerable and interconnected all of our global transportation systems really are, and we've spent a good amount of class time learning about different topics involving supply chain logistics. When the pandemic hit, labor shortages became a major issue very quickly. Workers got sick, they had to quarantine, or they simply just couldn't go to work due to safety concerns and travel restrictions not only on the United States but also across the globe. And this affected many areas in our supply chain, mostly in our methods of transportation, including trucking, shipping, which involves water, air, and rail transportation. These sectors are critical to keeping the global economy moving. In trucking, a shortage of drivers led to delayed deliveries across the country. In shipping, congested ports and crew issues caused massive blockages and slowdowns in the global supply chain. The air transportation system had fewer flights and not enough ground staff, which delayed air cargo and many essential goods. And in rail, staff cuts meant slower cargo handling and longer wait times. And all of these different issues had a large domino effect. Products didn't arrive on time, shelves stayed empty longer, and prices just went up dramatically. And what's interesting is how these disruptions are connected directly to the concept we've studied in class, like how supply chains rely on smooth coordination between different transportation modes. Through the diagram of the logistics system design matrix, we see how different transportation and distribution choices affect costs, speed, and flexibility in supply chains. It helps companies decide how to move products from factories to customers based on what's most important to them, whether it's fast delivery, lower costs, or the ability to adapt quickly. During the COVID-19 pandemic, this matrix became even more relevant, and this diagram is very useful and can be applied not only to just the pandemic, but can also be applied to our everyday lives.
First, let's talk about reducing the goods and services we offer. By narrowing down the variety of items we produce and focus solely on those that are in high demand, we can greatly simplify our operations. This reduction in complexity will allow us to streamline our production process, optimize resource allocation, and ultimately reduce the number of staff required. In doing so, we improve efficiency without sacrificing the core values that we provide to our customers. Next, the issue on the shortage of truck drivers. To remain competitive and ensure timely delivery, we have to offer better incentives, whether through increased compensation, improved benefits, or other driver-focused support systems. According to the book's transportation model, even when using the highway system with the average speed, cost, and capacity, we can still achieve timely delivery to customers. This means we don't necessarily need ideal conditions to succeed. We just need to make the most of the system and people we already have.
Solution would be adding new factory locations. By adding new factory locations closer to where the demand is located, you'd be able to combat some of those delivery inefficiencies. This would help to solve those problems by shortening the distance the products need to be delivered. So whenever workers are sick and can't come into work, or are quarantining and can't come into work, it would be less of an issue because less workers would be required in order to deliver the products that shorter distance. You could decide where to put these new factories by using the factor rating system or even the Cited method like we discussed in class. Another possible solution that's extremely simple is having clear communication with suppliers. In a time like COVID, demand is all over the place. So by clearly communicating with suppliers, it would help to solve problems by being clear and transparent with them about what's going on and what you're needing. This could help avoid problems like the bullwhip effect. An idea could be using the problems faced during COVID to help better prepare for future issues. This could help you manage risk in the future. An example of this could be creating contingency plans. Whether that's investing in insurance, safety stocks, or looking at multiple different suppliers, creating contingency plans could help better prepare you for when issues like pandemics could arise in the future. Now, when looking at all the different solutions and plans, it's important to consider a few different things. First, how long will the inhibitor last? In a situation like COVID, it was hard to tell how long that this scenario would last. But it's important to think about that when considering even adding in solutions, because if it's not going to last for long, it may not be worth applying those things. It's also important to consider how much this inhibitor is costing you. In a case like COVID, it was adding significant impact. So it was important to act. But in some cases, the solutions may cost more than the problem is even costing them. It's also important to think about what the long-term effects of the solutions might be. By adding solutions, sometimes there can be long-term effects of the solutions that are even bigger effects than the problem itself. And here is our works cited slide. Thank you so much for your time, and that concludes our presentation. We will now open up the floor to any questions you may have.